This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To find out what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, Rick Henderson from the Carolina Journal, former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker, and former legislator Connie Wilson. Well, welcome to NC Spin show number 991. On this edition, we're going to ask the panel to discuss the consent decree Governor Cooper is seeking in an HB2 lawsuit. We'll debate whether the quest to get Amazon's second headquarters is starting another war between the states, and wonder whether we should increase the amount our lottery commission can spend on advertising. And of course, as always, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get to it. It's been months since we talked about the bill known as HB2, but the controversy arose again last week when Governor Roy Cooper announced that he had come to a proposed consent decree with transgenders who had sued the state in federal court. The agreement has to be approved by a federal judge, but legislative leaders were quick to react. Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger said, "We trust the court will reject the governor's latest stunt," which is inconsistent with the deal he negotiated to repeal HB2. Rick Henderson, the agreement would allow transgender individuals to use the bathroom of their choice in public buildings controlled by agencies in Cooper's administration. How does this proposed agreement affect the HB2 repeal?
It actually doesn't affect that repeal at all for now, but once again, the governor is jumping into a divisive social issue and diverting attention of North Carolinians from the things that really matter to them, which is the rhetoric that then candidate Cooper used against Pat McCrory last year. What this does is it gives the judge an opportunity to see if he wishes to go against the sentiments of several of the defendants in this case, namely the legislature. And it's going to be a tough slog for the judge to do this, I think, because according to the agreement that the governor signed on to when he signed the law, only the General Assembly can have anything to do with changing facilities until 2020. And I know the hope at the time was that the courts would have settled this matter, or Congress would have, or the administration in Washington would have. But as for now, this is basically just a deal to get the Democrats hopefully excited about issues of LGBT rights again.
Well, Dennis, some people are saying that Cooper's solution carries the state much further than the HB2 repeal did. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I would have to disagree with that, and I agree with Rick. My understanding is that basically the court decree, the consent decree, is almost tracking the identical language that's in House Bill 142, which repealed HB2. So I don't think that it goes any further or goes any less than what that is, Tom, at this time.
Well, so Connie, why has Phil Berger and Tim Moore got their panties in a wad about this thing?
There's a process at the legislative building, and I do this with my clients. This is what we always do. If you're working on an issue with a group, let's say it's an original version of a bill you don't like, but you agree to the changes because some people get things they want, others don't get things they want, which is kind of how that bill that repealed HB2 was. Everybody didn't get what they wanted. But once you sign off on it, that means everybody sings Kumbaya together. And you walk through both chambers with it, the governor signs it, which he did, and then you stand together as a team. And so this actually has much larger implications because there have been very few bills that the administration and the legislature have worked together on. And so how do you have any kind of trust when at any time one side or another might bolt, and at this time
this didn't change it.
Well, but this, first of all, remember, this is a lawsuit. The state of North Carolina is being sued over legislation that was passed that a group of transgender plaintiffs and the ACLU believe is unconstitutional. So what this is a proposal by the governor and the attorney general to settle that lawsuit in a way that makes the lawsuit go away. So this isn't going back on a deal. This is trying to settle a lawsuit, and it also only applies to public buildings, as Tom said. It doesn't do anything else. That the governor also issued an executive order, which largely tracked what Governor McCrory did, which says you can't discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity in state government hiring and contractors.
Hey, Rick, help me understand this. The language says that it changed it for public buildings under which Governor Cooper had administration. What's included and what isn't here?
Well, what's not included would be buildings that are under the control of members of the Council of State who are not the governor.
And the General Assembly.
And the General Assembly, correct, that's right. So that would be, for instance, the State Fair, which is under Steve Troxel, the Agriculture Commissioner. Anything that's controlled by a Shuri Berry, the Labor Commissioner, Insurance Commissioner, the same sort of situation. But this would include things that the Department of Public Administration has some role in. And the Department of Public Administration has some minor role in private schools, for instance. And so they're going to have to come up with some guidance for how this decree would be implemented if the judge goes along with it. And that could have implications that are far beyond what state government buildings are
Some
handling.
on the far right, Dennis, were saying that this action is going to allow sexual predators to use women's restrooms. Is there any evidence at all to support those claims, or is that just more rhetoric?
Well, I would say to my far-right friends that they're off course on that. I don't think there's been any case that I can think of where that has actually occurred with anybody. If anybody can cite me a case, I'm willing to listen to it, but I don't think there's been one single case of this kind of thing going on anywhere in any bathrooms.
Chris, help me. What happens if this federal judge doesn't approve the consent decree?
Well, then I assume the lawsuit is still active, and this will proceed through the courts. Senator Berger and Speaker Moore want to dismiss the lawsuit, so they filed a motion not signing on to the consent decree. And remember, this is Judge Schroeder, who's a conservative judge who's appointed by a Republican president.
Schroeder, yeah, Winston-Salem. Connie, so if this agreement is approved, do you suspect the legislature will want to come back and do some more passage of legislation regarding transgenders and sexual preferences?
I think there will be some folk in both the House and Senate Republican caucuses who will want to do something. I think having this issue come up again in the format that it has, where there's not unity between the legislature and the governor is detrimental to our state. And
well, Rick, why wouldn't they want to get this lawsuit settled? It saves the state money. It just and if it doesn't change anything, what's the problem?
No, the big problem here is that we don't have any kind of unified guidance from the federal government about what the role of gays and lesbians are in federal anti-discrimination law. And that's what really started the whole kerfuffle to begin with. Now, if we get some sort of guidance from the Department of Justice, from the Department of Education, or from some other federal agency, or from Congress that actually sets this out in law, then we'd have something that's more straightforward. But right now, it's really a gray area right now.
I personally liked Connie's idea of going over to the legislature and standing in the gallery and watching 170 members sing Kumbaya. Anybody have any hopes that's going to take place?
Well, the fact of the matter is that this is a consent decree that has specified language in it that both sides have agreed to. I think the court can only determine whether or not, if the parties have agreed to that language that they put in that decree, and they can't go outside of that and cause mischief. And I think that's the concern by maybe the legislators, that maybe this will create some new mischief. It couldn't because of the way the court operates.
We'll keep following. Have you signed up to receive our free weekly email newsletter Spin Cycle? It's easy to do. Just go to our website, ncspin.com, and sign up. And while you're there, you can view the latest NC Spin show, get video footage and perspective pieces not seen anywhere else, and read my weekly column. Get more balanced debate for the Old North State at ncspin.com, NC Spin on YouTube, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back, bidding for Amazon's HQ2.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Agriculture is the backbone of our state's economy. It's the heartbeat of our rural communities. Its strength means bustling sidewalks and open signs in store windows. And with smart investments in our future, like the Plant Sciences Initiative and modern updated research stations, agriculture will remain the cornerstone of our economy. Because when agriculture is strong, our economy is strong.
For more than 45 years, the North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association has advocated for local and state government retirees. Whether protecting retiree benefits or fighting for cost of living adjustments, more than 70,000 members count on us to be their voice. Government retirees work for us, and we stand for them. Learn more at ncrgea.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
When the giant online retailer Amazon announced it was looking for a second American headquarters site, it set off a bidding competition some call the second war between the states. Amazon says it's going to spend some $5 billion on construction and employ 50,000 workers. Dennis, you've been involved in some of these big game hunts before. Earlier this year, our state offered more than $500 million to Foxconn to relocate here, but lost the bidding to Wisconsin's $3 billion incentive package. We've not done well in these big game hunts before. Why?
Well, you saw what Governor Chris Christie did. He put $7 billion down through the gauntlet down to get Amazon to come. Foxconn, projects like that, and Amazon, the Toyota deal, those are sort of mega deals. I will tell you that North Carolina has done pretty well on some of these things. So you look at the Allstate deal in Charlotte, drew 2,000 jobs. The one here that drew 2,250 jobs is an average salary of $72,000. And then, you know, we have other projects. You got the CSX project up in the northeastern part of the state that's going to employ a lot of people. I would have to say that the Department of Commerce, along with the North Carolina Partnership and the Governor's Office with the Legislature, has done a pretty good job in the past 12 months or so.
Tony Copeland's certainly an experienced guy over in Commerce, no question about it. Rick, here's what they're looking for. They want a site in a metropolitan area of around more than 1 million people, have nearby universities, on-site access to mass transit, a 45-minute or less commute to an international airport, major highway artery access, a diverse population, and recreational opportunities. Is anybody going to be able to fill all those requirements?
With enough dollars, yeah. If they're offering enough of a bribe to Amazon, then they'll figure it out. I don't think that we can do that in North Carolina, actually, because of the mass transit issue. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because the mass transit that they're talking about getting, which would largely be in the Triangle, would cause a lot of disruptions as far as commute is concerned for everybody who doesn't work for Amazon. And secondly, it's probably a money loser because these projects tend to be that way. And you can't, if you're going to locate a headquarters quickly, you're not going to put down a light rail line in 3 years. You're just not going to do that.
It's not going to happen.
No.
Following up on Dennis's point, if New Jersey's already offered $7 billion in incentives, what's it going to take to win this prize?
Well, I mean, first of all, you know, I'm not a big fan of incentives overall, but the biggest bidder doesn't always win. They look for a lot of other things. There was a business publication that actually came out this past week that said Raleigh RTP area was in, they thought they were in the top 5. And they pointed to the lack of mass transit, but they didn't think that would rule us out. It's also worth noting, for all the philosophical opposition of Republicans and Libertarians, you mentioned Wisconsin and Foxconn. Well, they have a governor who was a darling of Americans for Prosperity and everybody else who signed off on a $3 billion incentive deal. So a lot of philosophy goes by the board when you start waving 10, 20, 50,000 jobs in front of people.
We've talked a lot about this, Connie, in the past. Is there any way in the world we can justify spending that kind of money? From a cost-benefit analysis, does this make any sense at all?
Well, North Carolina must not believe that spending $3 or $4 or $5 billion makes sense because we've never done it. You know, we chip in money. I mean, we're in the game, and it always helps to be at the table on one of the top sites that are out there because people learn about you. They learn more about what you've got out there, and it helps with other deals that might come up. But North Carolina doesn't sell the store to get those type of projects, and we're reasonable.
Well, what we got to understand is that when you get the main large company to come, it's always a loser. It's not going to ever make money. You always lose money on the first one. It's the surrounding suppliers that come in and feed this mammoth manufacturing plant or whatever it may be, an Amazon. That's where you really prosper as a region and as a state.
But let's go beyond that, Rick, because when that happens and all these ancillary businesses and industries come in, surround them, it puts a tremendous demand on infrastructure, highways, schools, water and sewer, amenities and parks. If we were successful in landing this, wouldn't it be fairly reasonable to expect taxes would go up?
Yeah, well, it would be. And we've got this situation, a microcosm of this going on in Raleigh right now with the mayor's debate over the mayor's election, because you do have a number of corporate headquarters that have located in downtown Raleigh, and it's pushing out a lot of people who are interested in affordable housing. And that's a source of debate right now, is that if you make this indeed the next Silicon Valley or whatever, Silicon Valley housing prices are pretty high.
On the other hand, there are people who would say, and there are people in Greenville, Spartanburg that will tell you that BMW down there has transformed Greenville and Spartanburg, South Carolina.
No question.
And they gave them a ton of money.
All right, well, I was getting ready to ask you the question.
And they gave them a ton of facilities. And
Here
so
is
I think it's a tough
Jeff Bezos, the principal owner of Amazon, with a reported net worth of $84 billion, and we're getting ready to give them $7 billion. Isn't this Robin Hood in reverse?
I don't think North Carolina's going to give them $7 billion.
Well, I mean, isn't this Robin Hood in reverse?
That's what all business incentives do. You could say that about every corporation that we've ever given any money to.
Tom, let me say this. Nobody really likes incentives. I don't like nobody.
But we keep
does.
doing it.
Well, because if you don't do them, you're not in the game. And if you're not in the game, if you're not in an at-bat, you're not going to be able to hit the ball. You've got to play that game. It's one of those things that you just have to put up with to try to win these kinds of projects. And if we're not going to compete, then we're going to leave the jobs elsewhere.
Okay.
That's the problem.
But you were lieutenant governor back in 1992 when Mercedes-Benz decided they wanted to locate a new plant. We bid $200 and some million and lost out to Alabama, who gave them something like $500 million. And the price tag just keeps going up and up. When do the dominoes stop falling, Connie? Is anybody going to break this cycle?
Oh no, it's never going to break, because it's part of the hunt. That's just how it is. And if you want to be at the table, that's fine. If you don't want to be at the table, that's fine. But North Carolina has made the decision that we're going to have a reasonable economic incentive program in place. We're not going to be spending the gazillions of dollars, but we're going to be at the table for these projects.
I think I'm going to go to the Department of Commerce and tell them if they don't give us financial incentives for NC Spend, we're moving to South Carolina. What do you think? There might be some people that would like for us to.
Do you think South Carolina would like to hear about North Carolina politics?
Who knows? We'll talk about theirs. Why aren't we, if we're so willing to give out money, why aren't we willing to dole out money, incentives, help to small and medium-sized businesses in North Carolina? I grant you it's not as sexy.
Well, we do.
Legislature,
Well, not anywhere near that.
Well, the
do quite a bit.
legislature would argue with that, with the lowering of the personal income tax rate, the corporate income
But we
tax
give
rate.
small incentives all the time.
And you see them in the press releases from every governor's office.
From 20 jobs to 50 jobs.
That's right.
This does
Absolutely.
apply to expanding businesses, and some medium-sized small businesses do get these kind of incentives to expand.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. All right, October 19th was the deadline for filing the applications. Any idea when we might hear some word from Amazon, or at least find out who narrows the field?
They never, ever sort of tell you that information. They'll narrow it down to 2, maybe 3, and then they'll start the competition.
And then
between states.
renegotiate all over again.
They're-
Price of
listen,
playing poker goes
They
up.
didn't get off the train yesterday.
I got you. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about proposed lottery changes.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Life's busy, but you are the master at managing it. Thanks to your know-how and some helpful tools. As a member of an electric cooperative, you have access to lots of innovative tools that help you better manage your home energy use and your budget, so you can stay focused on what's most important. Discover how your electric cooperative can help you control your energy use at empowermenc.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
There are suggestions that our state lottery be allowed to double the amount of money they spend advertising to get people to play the games. But panelist John Hood recently wrote a column in which he proposed also that we return to one of the fundamental founding principles of the lottery and spend more money on public school construction. Connie, let's start with the proposal that we allow a lottery to double the amount of money that it spends trying to get people to play the games. What do you think of that?
Well, I think there would be a certain element at the legislative building that would be very positive toward that, because the return on investment for advertising would warrant, you know, spending the additional money. Personally, when I was in the legislature, I always voted against the lottery. I think it's just people who don't know how to do math real well are spending their money doing that. I don't know if it's going to get through or not, but I think there would definitely be some interest there for it.
Dennis, you were around also when the lottery was first passed. If you remembered, at Purdue, I think, or somebody had to cast the tie vote. We were promised that there were going to be fixed percentages given to supplement schools for instruction, for teachers, and for school constructions. The legislature has come in and changed and rechanged those formulas through the years. If the public knew they could count on fixed amounts of money going to these various categories, do you think they might be more amenable to allowing the advertising to double?
Yeah, I think if the public really felt like the legislature, and this has been going on for years in the North Carolina legislature, they supplant the funds.
Yeah.
You know, the education funds
they promised they weren't going to do that.
They weren't going to do that. Well, they did do that. And I'll come back to that sometime later on the show. But, you know, the Georgia model was the one that we should have followed, where a constitutional amendment is passed, where every red penny would go to things like the Hope Scholarship and the pre-K program. So that's the kind of thing we missed out on when we passed it.
Rick, let's focus on the school issue for a second. Traditionally, it's been the local education authority in each county that was responsible for providing the school buildings. But we know that a lot of rural areas don't have the tax base to be able to build new buildings. And many of the urban areas, in a situation in which the growth is so fast, they can't keep up with it in building new schools. Should the state take over the responsibility of building schools?
That's a tough one, because we do have the tradition of having locals provide that spending. One way to do it would be through perhaps the lottery, and there's been talk in the past of doing some sort of grant program involving the state, in which counties might apply for grants to get
we've done that
construction.
Before. Yeah.
And that might be one way to do it, through lottery funding.
Chris, there are a lot of people that are saying that the Connect NC bonds that we passed a year or so ago should have had school construction money in it, and there is some thinking maybe in the next session we might propose a school bond referendum.
Well, every so often that it is a local government's responsibility, but every so often the General Assembly sets up some special fund or has a bond issue. I don't think that's a bad idea. We have schools, Greene County always is used as the example by Senator Brown. They simply can't raise taxes anymore and they need to renovate schools. But doubling lottery advertising is a terrible idea. We don't need to prey upon people anymore instead of raising money, honestly.
All right, after the break, we asked the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
Now it's time to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Connie Wilson, I'll start with you.
Well, now that we're finally done, we hope, with special veto override sessions and whatever, we're getting down to the normal work of the General Assembly. Right now, we've got staff in both the Speaker's office and President Pro Tem's office working on appointments to study commissions, and those commissions are going to come up with the issues that are going to be high profile for April 2018 for the next short session. So actually, this is when we're trying to get our folk on and trying to get those issues moving or not moving if we don't like them.
I hear you. Dennis Wicker, tell us something we don't know.
In the next 5 years, millennials are going to take over as the biggest population of a generation. They don't like cars. They don't like houses. They're very frugal because they're saddled with college debt. Well, what you don't know is that's going to have a tremendous impact on the economy, which is going to have a tremendous impact on what revenues we can raise for essential public services that are provided.
Interesting. You've got 2 millennials, I think, don't you?
I got 3.
You got 3 millennials. Rick Henderson, tell us something we don't know.
Well, we were talking about school construction, and last week the legislature learned about college construction and how expensive it is to build buildings at university campuses. They found out that it costs about $460 a square foot to build on. That's average. Now, at UNC and NC State, it's $600 a square foot. And one reason is that the contracts are written so expensively. And for example, at NC State, they have to purchase a special color, pigment for the mortar in the bricks so that all the bricks are the same color. So we're spending twice as much on university buildings as we would on, say, hospitals.
What would you expect at Chapel Hill and NC State? Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
Sort of along those lines, there's a scandal going on in Chapel Hill. It has nothing to do with academics or basketball or mortar. It has to do with the way the Board of Governors is conducting its business. They've appointed several task force. Tom Fetzer's behind it. We've talked about it on the show. They are literally refusing to tell us who are the members of the task force of a public university Board of Governors. They release notices of these meetings sometimes less than 24 hours before the meetings are underway. They are blatantly violating the open meetings law, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about it.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, we'll be talking about it for sure. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.